MARCOLMAR CETME L first shots. But it didn't hurt open derp.
Hi, Misha here, and I thought it was time to talk about the Spanish CETME L series again. In the past, we've reviewed the semi-automatics in America. We've talked about the history. Today, though, I want to talk about specifically MARCOLMAR, MCM, Dave Bain's company, production, all the various options, models, styles. Really, they've taken the design that even Spain wasn't all that interested in and made it their own. And it's quite interesting. They haven't just made a just as good gun. They've made a better gun. And I don't say that very often at all when it comes to American kit builds with a lot of American parts. Typically, more original the better. But the original CETME L had some problems. Some weren't its fault, some were. And at first we had some autos from HMG. And then more recently, over the last couple of years, we've had from MARCOLMAR. And I have the three main versions here. This is the standard CETME L with 16-inch barrel. This is the CETME LV, very similar with the same barrel, but it has this old school STANAG scope mount for an HK Hensoldt type scope. And then finally, you can tell this is mine because it has the sling on it, the CETME LC, which has not only a collapsing stock, but because of that, a redesigned bolt carrier, cocking piece, recoil spring, and barrel front end assembly. So quite a bit different. And these all do represent different versions in the Spanish military, but MARCOLMAR has really made it their own, especially with the basic L. As you can tell, the coloration of this one, the fact that it has a modern 1913 Picatinny rail on top. And as we'll discuss, they've reworked the springs and the sights to make them more useful and effective. But first, let's talk about Generation 1, Generation 2, because that's probably the most common question I get when it comes to these MARCOLMARs. Early on, the MARCOLMARs shipped in a cardboard box with, very ample foam lining. It was quite a deep box, not unlike the IWI foam lined. But around the time, actually just a little bit after the switch to Gen 2, they started shipping them in this tactical case that reminds me of kind of what HK uses. Quite large, very thick and heavy, lots of straps and buckles. And you get a spiral bound manual. Kind of quaint. And there's also a small oil bottle and a card or two in there and some other stuff. So here's the CETME LV. But the main difference between Gen 1 and Gen 2 is quite simple. Gen 1 was optimized to take original Spanish CETME mags. These were made of steel. They look like their STANAG AR-15 M16, and they're close. For one, they don't have a bolt hold open catch on the follower because the gun doesn't have it. The steel curvature is a little different, but the wildest difference is the base plate. It's just a spring-loaded plate. Essentially, these are a copy or take on the FNFNC mag. The two mags are very closely related. Well, with the Gen 2, knowing that some people were having problems getting different AR mags to fit, MARCOLMAR kind of reworked the mag well a bit so it would take a wide range of mags. Here's the one it ships with. So they're shipping it with a US made alloy mag. And it will still take the original Spanish mags, no worries. There's a bit of resistance. It's easy to do when you're in the field, you know, behind the gun. But yeah, so that's the major difference. They reworked the receiver just a bit so it'll take a wider range of mags, original Spanish and American. And they offer a wide range of options today for these two. Alright, the MARCOLMAR with the Spanish mag and wolf ammo.
Okay.
The MARCOLMAR L with a Gila. The original military select fire gun was tested in the 80s, adopted in 84, put into production in 86. First really was in the hands of the Army in 87 and got its baptism of fire during Operation Desert Storm in 1991. It didn't do great. Part of it was the desert. Part of it, those steel mags. Another part, the quality of Spanish ammo wasn't the best. And another part was the simple fact that, frankly, the Santa Barbara factory was getting a little long in the tooth. A lot of its tooling was getting dull. The standards maybe weren't as high as they could have been. The standard rifle was about 36.5 inches long. It had a 15.7-inch barrel, meaning for our US semi-autos, they do need to extend the barrel a 1/4 inch, nothing major. Early ones would have this open 3-prong flash hider. Later they would go to a bird cage. Standard iron sights, yeah. And the original guns were green, very, very green. And the standard gun did not typically have much in the way of scope mounting, although some rear sight bases have the cutout for it and so on. They also had a bayonet lug up here, and those features are all retained on the MARCOLMAR. But MARCOLMAR wasn't content just to kind of do that. They really rebuilt this gun from the ground up. It uses some original Spanish parts, but they're either refinished, redone, or often made in America. For example, they made their own furniture sets as opposed to using surplus ones that may or may not have been in good shape. Of course, the receiver is made by MARCOLMAR. The barrel is cold hammer forged. It's nitrided. It has a 1-in-7 twist. It's fluted, and at various times they've worked with RCM and done these in-house. It kind of just depends on the production run. They have several color options. They use Cerakote for the metal finish. Of course, as you see, they do black, they do green. They also do gray, which is kind of an interesting choice. And they do flat, dark earth. And on the standard model here, for $50 more, you can get a Picatinny rail welded onto the receiver. Not a bad choice for someone needing such a thing. And it will take the standard bipod that clamps on there if you so wish. It does take the standard bayonet. However, they did rework the sights. They milled this out a bit, and they gave a finer front sight post for hopefully, well, better sighting. They've also used all brand new springs, including the recoil spring, extractor spring. They've even redesigned the specs on some of the springs because that was another issue with some of the Spanish service guns, was too weak or unreliable spring. Yeah, so there's not a lot of original Spanish stuff left in here. Mostly things like the bolt group, at least in part. And speaking of, I'm sure you know this, but these are a roller delay gun. Similar in concept to the Heckler & Koch HK33. Like the 33, they fire 5.56 NATO. But it's a different system. It's a square receiver, well, more or less square, square topped. And the bolt group is square. We have a unique bolt hold open manual system here. There's not a separate trigger housing, at least externally. The packet goes right in here. It does use push pins. And we have a very big recoil spring system in the buttstock. And we have a rubber recoil pad and a pretty ergonomic pistol grip. All this kind of adds up to the fact that these are very gentle shooters. So that's the Spanish CETME L. And this was the standard service rifle in Spain from 87 up through the early 2000s. In 98, they were starting to look at who to replace it with. They picked the the G36. And by 2002, 2004, these started to be surplused out. And that's ultimately how they ended up over here. But that was just a standard Army gun. They would ultimately order about 100,000. And of those, about 10,000 parts kits were purchased by MARCOLMAR. And while most were the standard L here, not all were. Wolf and the MARCOLMAR L.
Works with Brownell's reproduction retro waffle mags, so
That's a thing.
yeah.
Now the MCM, and I'm tired of it working, so I'm going to try Tula.
So yeah, it's Tula. That's a thing.
Very similar to the standard L, we have the CETME LV. V for visor, sight, scope, optic. This is virtually identical. In fact, the original military version, identical, except it has what was at the time a STANAG mount welded as top of the receiver. And it does have an iron sight flip here to manipulate it. You have to kind of come in from the top. You could do it from the front or back, but it would be difficult. And this was to accept something like a Hensoldt scope. Of course, with the MARCOLMAR, it has a slightly extended 16-inch barrel instead of 15.7 as on the original. As far as I know, MARCOLMAR only offers these in the green, although they do give the option for an extra $50 to upgrade to a medium heavy profile barrel. Otherwise, it's a standard lightweight. Pretty much the same gun. MARCOLMAR says they received 140 LV kits. And these were used by the Spanish Army, at least primarily. But you know, even though this is how MARCOLMAR ships them, a DMR isn't much without its optic. Meet the Enosa, a daylight 4-power magnified scope. Again, it fits on the mount with the screws underneath. It goes right on. Very easy. Very quick to install and remove if needs be. And you can still use your iron sights, although flipping them might require a bullet tip. But it's there. This is made domestically in Spain. It's used on a few different guns, but primarily the Army's LV here. And Seems to be a reasonably decent scope for what it is. Not super heavy by the standards of the 80s. And a nice secure mount here. Again, MARCOLMAR doesn't ship these with the scopes. You'll have to find them elsewhere. And if you can't find the Enosa, some other ones from Germany can fit. Anything that will fit this kind of STANAG type mount will ostensibly work, especially if it's meant for a 5.56. So that's the daylight scope. But what if you're at dusk or nighttime? Here's the Enosa day scope off the gun. Like I said, it's not terribly big and heavy. That cannot be said for its counterpart. This is the Starlight. This is a Generation 2 night vision device powered with AA batteries, believe it or not, also made in Spain by Enosa. And yeah, like a lot of Generation 2, it is not svelte. Also, its protection against light surges and all that is limited, although it does have some, and it does have a day filter that it comes with. Still not as big as some of the Russian optics, I'll say that. Oh boy. That is a thing, guys. That is a thing. And we will, well, I won't. You don't want me trying to do an optics review. This is just a preview of these optics. We will be taking them to the range, although it might be a little while, and trying to do some shots with them and give you a better idea of what it's like to really use these. But, you know, I promised you every MARCOLMAR variant, and there is one still missing. MARCOLMAR says they're doing a limited run of 150 CETME LVS models. And the S stands for SUSAT, Sight Unit Small Arm Trilux or Trilux. Virtually the same exact gun, except it has a welded dovetail rail. It's actually an L12 type rail, like the L12A1 SUSAT, used on the SA85, the L85 type guns. And there's no iron sight built into the gun here because there are iron sights at the top of the SUSAT. There's actually a peep back here and a little blade in the front. And yes, this is a British-made scope used on several guns from the FAL to modern day. And this version was used by the Spanish Marines, specifically Marine Special Forces units. So not as many were produced, kind of a special run thing. And these do come from MARCOLMAR with the SUSAT scope, because kind of without the scope, you wouldn't have sights. You do have a front sight, but I don't know why they didn't machine it off, frankly. Not MARCOLMAR, but Spain. Kind of seems vestigial. One thing MARCOLMAR did do, remember with the LV, I said you could pay an extra $50 to get a medium-heavy barrel. Well, the LVS comes by default with the medium-heavy barrel. It's not so much thicker out front, but it is thicker under the handguard. Otherwise, same rifle in green, just with Trilux mounted. This too is a 4-power optic. It uses tritium. And so can be used at night, at least to some extent. It has the unique aiming reticle. Here's it with the Enosa. Just two very different optics. So the Army did a separate day and a separate night scope. The Marines, the Navy, they use the British SUSAT. As to which is better, that is debatable, to say the least. But this is a really cool variant to come in from MARCOLMAR. And we will definitely be trying one of these out at the range as well. So they're doing 140 LVs and 150 LVSs for a grand total of 290. So still half of what they're doing for our next gun coming up. CETME LC. There we go. LC with Silver Bear.
Clear?
The CETME LC, C for Corto, short. And again, this is actually my gun. And these were built for the Spanish Marines too, when they needed something smaller, as well as the paratroopers and the special forces. It's also worth pointing out that the Spanish police issued the L in a few variations, but that was kind of a separate contract. In the front, the original gun had a 12.6 inch barrel, and the MARCOLMAR does too, although it's a US made barrel. You can buy this as either a factory SBR, or you can buy it with an extended flash hider on here. This is all extension, meaning if you want to SBR it later, there's a blind pin you can remove, unscrew this, and they even are gracious enough to ship it with the original flash hider. So screw it on and you're good to go. Because of the short barrel, it did not have the grenade ring, and it does not have the bayonet mount, bayonet lug. The handguard was the same, but because the recoil system in the standard rifles in the stock, when they wanted to go to a collapsing stock, they had to move it up into the receiver, not unlike kind of the issue that FN faced with the FAL when they went to the FAL paratrooper model. The button is on the top here. It's actually a pretty easy stock to do, at least when you're trying to use it, but MARCOLMAR makes these quite tight. And this is not a fancy modern stock. It's not multiple positions. It's just in and out, kind of like the old XM 177 E2s. So yeah, we have a different spring in here. Because of the spring being up here, we have a longer bolt carrier for the spring to be housed in. And because of that, the cocking support in here is shorter to mate up. The receiver is essentially the same. So the difference is different barrel, different front sight base, different buttstock, of course, different spring, different bolt carrier, and different cocking piece inside there. Otherwise, yeah, so a good amount of parts commonality. I have mine set up as close to Spanish military. The SBR version is quite compact, at under 34 inches with the stock deployed, and just over 26 inches with it reduced in, retracted in. And even with the extension on here, it's still a very short gun, because it's barely at 16 inches. So options. You can obviously get it in green. You can also get it in black, and you can get it in gray. They don't offer FDE in the LC as a standard, but according to the MARCOLMAR website, you can request as a special order an FDE LC. You can also add a top Picatinny rail welded on for an extra $50. So these can be customized a bit. That said, according to MARCOLMAR, they only received 640 LC parts kits. So they're not quite as adventurous about modifying the parts. Specifically, they don't rework the front sight like they would on the standard L, and they don't modify the rear sight aperture because they know these parts are relatively collectible, and so people will probably want to have authentic. And the buttstocks on these are original. and I've put Spanish pistol grip and handguard on mine, but when they ship, they come with the US made stuff. So yeah, 10,000 kits, and over 9,000 are the standard L, making the LC quite uncommon, in the LV, LVS combo even less common than that. But it's neat that they at least are offering them, because before MARCOLMAR, no one was really doing those. Of course, there was one other manufacturer building these beforehand, but they only did this one model. Alright, the LC with the Gila. And we're open. The LC with little Spanish mag and Wolf. Helps if I take the safety off.
Yeah, you're good.
Just wanted to make sure that safety worked, that's all.
Credit where credit is due. HMG was the first to do a semi-automatic receiver and gun for the CETME L. Before that, we just didn't have them. And even after the kits came in, it took a good long while. And I've already done a video kind of comparing the pros and cons to each. The MARCOLMAR is a better gun. It's built to take a wider range of mags. It's built to cycle a wider range of ammunition. All new furniture, all new springs, cold hammer forged barrel, very nicely done receiver, very nicely done Cerakote finish. They use robot welding for the receivers, and just other kind of modern technology. Whereas HMG is more of a traditional kit build. Still has a US barrel. Of course, that is US receiver. And it uses surplus furniture and other parts, including the original springs. So a lot of times the quality of your gun is just kind of dependent on the quality of your parts kit you were using. And of course HMG has a lot of other baggage, but let's separate that and just talk about that. HMG really made this one version. There are a few custom one-offs of LVs and LCs, but for the most part they did the CETME L, and they only did a couple of hundred at that. I think if you're wanting a good shooter, the MARCOLMAR is the way to go. However, if you're wanting an authentic Spanish Army clone with all the detractions still inside, the HMG might be better, or at least equal. For one thing, the markings and the way the receiver is welded is actually a little more authentic, plus it comes with the original furniture, and I've noticed that the barrel is a little bit of a thinner profile versus the MARCOLMAR. The MARCOLMAR barrel is still very thin, but this is just a tiny bit thinner and more like the original. HMG with Wolf and Spanish mag. HMG with Silver Bear.
Clear.
I'd say that was the one it liked. Flipping them over, we can see one thing that definitely makes the MARCOLMAR superior. This neat little flange here behind the ejection port. Not only is that original, it works as a pretty effective, simple brass deflector. And the HMG does not have it. It is not required for proper functioning, but it does make shooting it a little easier, especially left-handed. Now, it's not that HMG forgot about it. It's just that making that little flange for a stamped receiver adds a lot of time, cost, and complication. HMG just decided it wasn't worth it, that not having it would be good enough. And considering they were only planning on making 100 or 200 of these, it makes sense. Whereas MARCOLMAR was willing to invest more time and money because they were planning to make these in the thousands. And that's something else to kind of keep in mind. HMG pretty much did these to raise money for other projects, which will not be named in this video because, oh dear God. MARCOLMAR, on the other hand, is a passion project of Dave Bain and his crew. He is not building these because he needs the money. He's doing it because there are certain guns he always wished would be available, at least a quality version, on the American market, and never were before. The Czech Uk Vz59 is another one of his guns. But he took quite a bit of time, several years, to kind of develop this, and sunk a ton of money into it, again including making all new furniture and doing a really good job of replicating it. And on top of that, using cold hammer forged barrels, and again all new springs. He did not cut any corners, and it shows in the product. Is a modern cycling gun. These are fantastic. But if you want to see the gun that the Spanish military had to suffer through in Desert Storm, the HMG is a better bet. Also, I think the texture on the finish is a little less shiny, kind of matches Spanish original more. And for whatever reason, mine here seems a little bit softer shooting than the MARCOLMARs I've fired. But it is a little more ammo sensitive. It needs a little bit of hotter ammo, whereas the MARCOLMAR will pretty much shoot anything. But with the 1-in-7 twist, it's kind of optimized for 62 grain and heavier. But yeah, I just wanted to bring this out for a brief little cameo, I guess you would say. So let's bring this video home. HMG with full mag of wolf. Alrighty. Alright, now the HMG with a Gila. Does not seem like a Gila. Let's try it again.
Here. You think that would be hotter ammo?
Try one more time.
Good.
It's funny is that I don't even feel it like it's ejecting fine. Weird. Yeah. Okay. HMG with Tula. Why not?
So it worked with Tula, steel case Russian cheapo ammo that has no power, and did not work with Aguila 62 grain.
What it's not working with are brass case. Every steel case we seem to try and it works fine.
Oh, that's a good point. Interesting.
Wrapping things up, I wanted to revisit the LVS for a second. The LVS, this is from MARCOLMAR, just came in the store. The LVs I've had in the store for a while, but without the Enosa scopes. I have both of these, along with the full kit. They were graciously donated as a loaner, not to keep, from Honey Creek Industries, Steve Hovermail. So he donated the full kit, and we'll go over its contents and how these, all three optics work at the range. Hopefully in a video in late summer, early fall, as soon as the weather permits us to get to the range. So yeah, I just wanted to give a special thanks and acknowledgement of there. Let's try the LC this way. And Jay's gonna give it a go.
Clear.
CETME LC. I appreciate you hanging out with me today. If you could, please like, share, and subscribe and all that good stuff. And as always, feel free to comment. We really like to kind of have discussions. And I've been kind of wanting to do this video for a couple of months while I had access to all three MARCOLMAR variants. The standard rifle was really a blessing for me last year in 2020. I was able to get these for not inflated prices. So when people wanted a quality 223 5.56 rifle that took standard AR mags, this might not have been their first choice, but a lot of people bought them and really were happy they did. So that was at least something I could keep in stock, and I could tell people, well, it's not an AR, it's not an AK, and it's not an HK clone or copy. Keep in mind the roller lock system, while the prototypes like the SGG 45M started off in Nazi Germany, full development and production was at CETME in Spain. The Model A, the Model B, and the Model C in 7.62 NATO. And so that led naturally to the 223 version. This is not just a knockoff one way or the other. It's its own thing, and it's really one of the last like 80s style military rifles. So that's just cool. Now the LVs has this interesting story. Didn't really plan to buy many, but last year, or early this year I guess it was, a customer asked if I could order him one. And I called up my distributor and I said, yeah, I need to get one for a customer, and while I'm at it, maybe I'll get a couple for my store. Kind of interesting. And they came back and said, well, we have a dozen left in stock if you take them all, and they offered me a bulk price, and I just couldn't say no to it. And these aren't the fastest sellers, but I've sold more than half over the last half year. So, but one moves about once a month. It's because this is a very specific gun. This is for collectors, enthusiasts. If I could see to use a scope, I'd probably keep one just because the mount is interesting. But since I can't, I really cannot justify it. And these do cost quite a bit more than the standard one. But that makes sense when you have 150 of one kit style and only 140 of the other, this one here. And even though it's hard to get the Spanish scopes or even the SUSATs now, you can use a few other different types like the Hensoldts on these. At least that's what I'm told. Scopes are really not my forte. I know that's probably shocking to you. But otherwise, it's a pretty standard gun. So that's neat, and they are not going to make many. But the one I jumped for was the LC, and I'm glad I did. This is just a cool little gun. It's actually a little bit heavier. The standard rifle is about 7.5 pounds, so it's not a heavy gun for the 80s and being all steel except for polymer. But the LV and the LC are closer to 8 pounds because of the stock on this one and the mount on the other. Still not bad, but it's so compact for what it is. And this stock is actually a lot more comfortable than the HK collapsing stock. It's got more of a curve to it. It's got a rubber recoil pad, and just the way the arms interface, to me it's just more comfortable. And it's a very stable stock, very well built. Even if the gun themselves were kind of questionable, the stocks sure weren't. The concept of these was fine. It's just sometimes the execution was less than perfect. So I'm happy this is the one I kept from MARCOLMAR. For my regular L rifle, I'll keep that HMG you just saw. It has a bit of sentimental value to me, and I'm in it low enough money that it doesn't really matter. And it does cycle well, as you saw in most of the clips. But yeah, so that's what I'm kind of planning on doing. Keeping the HMG L rifle and the MARCOLMAR LC carbine. I'm a sucker for carbines. But if I could use a scope, I would definitely keep the LV or the LVS. And if you're just wanting a unique gun to take to the range that still uses common ammo, common mags, and has a common scope mount, the standard L is not a bad option. If you do, I would say definitely pay the $50 for the Picatinny rail. It's a high quality rail welded on at the factory during manufacture. No way is this going to lose zero. It is on there. It is part of the receiver. It's going to serve you well. And it's going to shoot quite accurately because of this high quality barrel. I mean, it's a really good barrel for what it is. This isn't a cheap Century Arms level kit gun. This is a kit gun done absolutely right. And that's kind of the tagline for the MARCOLMAR. I would say, yeah, MARCOLMAR, they do kit guns right. If only every company we had were like this. And it's clear that they have a passion for the project, because they've made a better Model L than Spain did. So yeah, which one of the three is your favorite variant? Let's talk about it below. And which color would you like? Traditional green, modern tactical black? I think gray sounds kind of interesting. You don't hear many gray guns. It kind of reminds me, at least in my head, of the old SP1s. And of course, flat dark earth is kind of the trendy modern color. So yeah, let me know in the comments. And if you own one of the LVSs, I'd love to hear how it turned out for you. I never have had one in here, so yeah. Again, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. And with that, I'm going to go have some dinner, and I wish you a very good evening. This is Misha. Catch you very soon, next time. CETME Model L.
Very smooth.
CETME Model L, last mag of the day.